on AMC True Crime.
What if I told you that for 2 years, neighbors complained about a horrible smell coming from one house, but everyone blamed the sausage shop next door? What if I told you that inside that house, 11 women were slowly decomposing while their killer continued his daily routine, chatting with neighbors, walking freely through Cleveland? On October 29, 2009, police finally entered 12205 Imperial Avenue. What they found inside changed Cleveland forever. This is the story of Anthony Sowell, the Cleveland Strangler, and how his house of horrors went undetected for years. But before we reveal the full scope of this nightmare, let's go back to September 22, 2009, to the last day one woman thought she might live. Before we dive into this disturbing case, hit that subscribe button and the bell icon, because we're covering the most shocking true crime cases that mainstream media won't touch. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. And if you can handle the full truth about what happened on Imperial Avenue, stick around, because what you're about to hear will change how you see your own neighborhood forever. September 22, 2009. Latundra Billups needs a fix. At 36 years old, she knows the dangers of her addiction, but the craving is stronger than her fear. When she meets Anthony Sowell on the streets of Cleveland, she thinks she's found salvation. "Come to my place," he says with that familiar smile neighbors know so well. "I've got what you need." You have to understand something about Imperial Avenue in 2009. This isn't a neighborhood where people ask too many questions. It's a place where women disappear, and sometimes they're just written off. But Latundra doesn't know she's walking into the lair of Cleveland's most prolific serial killer. The house at 1220 Imperial Avenue looks ordinary from the outside. 2 stories, peeling paint, nothing that screams danger. But as Latundra follows Anthony Sowell through that front door, she's entering what investigators will later call a house of horrors. Inside, the smell hits her immediately. It's overwhelming, like rotting meat, decay, death itself. But Sowell has an explanation ready. "It's that sausage shop next door," he says casually. "Raised sausage. The smell gets in here all the time." Latundra wants to believe him. She needs to believe him, because if she doesn't, if that smell is something else, they do drugs together. Crack cocaine. And that's when Anthony Sowell's mask finally slips. What happens next will haunt Latundra for the rest of her life. Sowell becomes violent, predatory. His eyes change. Witnesses will later describe them as black like a demon. He beats her, he rapes her, and then he wraps an electrical cord around her neck. Latundra feels consciousness slipping away. The room grows dark. She's dying, and she knows it. 11 other women who entered this house never made it out alive. But somehow, impossibly, Latundra survives. When she regains consciousness, she finds herself alone. Sowell thinks she's dead, and in that moment of clarity, despite her injuries, despite the trauma, she makes the decision that will finally bring down the Cleveland Strangler. She runs. But here's what Latundra doesn't know as she escapes into the night. She's leaving behind the decomposing remains of 11 women. Women who trusted Anthony Sowell just like she did. Women whose families have been searching for them for months, even years. Coming up in the next chapter, Latundra's desperate race to survive leads police to Imperial Avenue. But what they discover there is beyond their worst nightmares. October 29, 2009, Detective Lieutenant Thomas Stachio receives what seems like a routine assignment. Serve an arrest warrant for Anthony Sowell, charges of rape and kidnapping based on Latundra Billups' testimony. It's the kind of warrant Cleveland police serve dozens of times each month. But as Detective Stachio approaches 122205 Imperial Avenue, he notices something that makes his stomach turn: the smell. It was unlike anything I'd ever encountered in 20 years of police work. Staccio will later testify. Sweet, sickening, overwhelming, like death itself. The neighbors aren't surprised to see police at Sowell's house. They've been complaining about that smell for 2 years. Ray Cash, who lived across the street, had called the city multiple times. I told them something was dead over there. He'll tell reporters, but everyone kept saying it was the sausage shop. Ray's Sausage, the small meat market next door, had become the convenient explanation for Imperial Avenue's most horrifying secret. Sowell isn't home, but police have a warrant. As they force open the front door, the smell becomes unbearable. Detective Staccio covers his face with his shirt, but it's no use. That sweet, putrid odor of decomposition is everywhere. In the living room, they find makeshift graves, bodies hidden behind walls, under floorboards, in places no human being should ever be found. The first victim they discover is so badly decomposed that identification will take days, but this is just the beginning. As more officers arrive, the scope of the horror becomes clear. This isn't just a murder scene, it's a graveyard, a serial killer's dumping ground where he's been storing his victims like trophies. Detective Staccio radios for backup, for the coroner, for anyone who can help process what they're seeing. Because in 20 years of police work, nothing has prepared him for this. The media arrives within hours. News vans line Imperial Avenue as word spreads. Cleveland has a serial killer, and he's been operating right under everyone's noses for years. But where is Anthony Sowell? As police search the house, discovering body after body, the man responsible for this carnage has simply vanished into the Cleveland streets. He could be anywhere. He could strike again. The manhunt begins. Coming up in the next chapter, the body count rises as investigators make discoveries that will shock even seasoned homicide detectives, and Anthony Sowell remains on the run. October 30th, 2009. Crime scene investigators descend on Imperial Avenue like a SWAT team, but nothing in their training has prepared them for what they're about to uncover. Dr. Frank Miller, the Cuyahoga County coroner, arrives at the scene expecting to process 2 bodies. By the end of the week, that number will climb to 11. Each room told a story of violence, Dr. Miller will later recall. These women didn't just die here. They were tortured, brutalized, and then discarded like garbage. In the basement, investigators find bodies wrapped in plastic bags, hidden behind makeshift walls. In the backyard, cadaver dogs locate shallow graves where Sowell buried his victims when he ran out of space inside the house. In the attic, they discover a human skull in a plastic bucket. Each discovery is more horrifying than the last. The victims all share similar characteristics. African American women, ages 25 to 52, most struggling with addiction. Women who society often overlooks. Women whose disappearances didn't generate massive manhunts or media attention. Crystal Dozier, 35, mother of 7, vanished in May 2007. Her family filed missing person reports, but with no leads, the case went cold. Now investigators know why. She was already dead, decomposing in Anthony Sowell's house while her children waited for her to come home. Tashana Culver, 31, disappeared in June 2008. Her mother, Yvette, never stopped looking for her. "I knew something terrible had happened," Yvette tells reporters. Tashana would never abandon her children. One by one, the victims are identified. One by one, their stories emerge. And with each identification, the weight of this tragedy grows heavier. But here's what makes this case even more disturbing. Many of these women had been reported missing. Their families had begged police to take their disappearances seriously. Missing person reports were filed, photos were distributed, yet somehow Anthony Sowell continued killing with impunity. The question everyone in Cleveland is asking, how did this happen? How does a serial killer operate for 2 years in a residential neighborhood without being caught? As investigators piece together the timeline, a chilling pattern emerges. Sowell would lure women to his house with offers of drugs or alcohol. Once inside, he would assault them, strangle them, and then hide their bodies throughout the property. But the most disturbing revelation is still to come. Neighbors describe Sowell as friendly, helpful, ordinary. He would sit on his front porch, chat about the weather, complain about that smell from the sausage shop, all while the bodies of his victims rotted just feet away. Coming up in Chapter 4, the manhunt intensifies as police realize they're hunting a predator who's perfected the art of hiding in plain sight. But Anthony Sowell is about to make a crucial mistake. November 2nd, 2009. Anthony Sowell has been on the run for 4 days. Cleveland police have issued a bolo alert, be on the lookout, with his description circulated to every law enforcement agency in Ohio. But Sowell isn't running. He's hiding in plain sight. Detective Sergeant Ray Diaz leads the manhunt. With 11 bodies discovered and possibly more victims out there, every minute Sowell remains free is a minute he could kill again. We knew we were dealing with a highly organized predator, Sergeant Diaz explains to reporters. This wasn't random violence. Sowell had a method, a pattern. He selected his victims carefully. The profile emerges. Sowell targets vulnerable women, often those struggling with addiction. He gains their trust, lures them to his house, and then strikes. What makes him particularly dangerous is his ability to appear normal, trustworthy, even helpful. Neighbors tell police about the nice man who lived at 12205 Imperial Avenue. Virginia Oliver, who lived next door, remembers Sowell helping her carry groceries. He seemed like a gentleman, she says, never caused any trouble. But investigators are uncovering a different side of Anthony Sowell. Born in 1959, Sowell grew up in East Cleveland in a chaotic household. 7 children, plus 7 more belonging to his deceased sister, all crammed into one house. Reports of abuse, neglect, dysfunction from an early age. At 18, Sowell joined the Marines. For 7 years he served his country, even receiving commendations for his service. But when he returned to civilian life, something had changed. In 1989, Sowell was arrested for attempted rape. The victim was a pregnant woman he had lured to an abandoned building. He served 15 years in prison, and when he was released in 2005, he moved to Imperial Avenue. The timeline becomes chilling clear. 2 years after his release, the murders began. But here's where the case takes an unexpected turn. Despite the massive manhunt, despite his face being plastered across every news channel in Cleveland, Anthony Sowell isn't hiding in some remote location. He's still in the city, moving through neighborhoods where people know him. On November 5th, a tip comes in. Someone spotted Sowell at a homeless shelter on the east side. Police rush to the location, but he's already gone. Another sighting on November 6th, this time at a crack house where Sowell was known to buy drugs. Again, police arrive too late. It's as if Sowell knows exactly how to stay one step ahead of law enforcement, and with each near miss, frustration grows. But on November 5th, 2009, Anthony Sowell makes the mistake that will end his reign of terror. He gets cocky. Coming up in Chapter 5, a routine police patrol leads to the arrest that Cleveland has been waiting for. But even in custody, Anthony Sowell has more secrets to reveal. November 5th, 2009, 2:47 p.m. Officer Michael Davis is on routine patrol when he spots a familiar figure walking near East 143rd Street. Something about the man's posture, his hurried pace, triggers recognition. It's Anthony Sowell. I couldn't believe it, Officer Davis will later recall. After all the manhunt resources, all the tips and false leads, here he was just walking down the street like nothing had happened. He approaches Sowell carefully, hand on his weapon. For a moment, the two men make eye contact, and in that instant, Officer Davis sees what witnesses have described, those dead, emotionless eyes. Sowell doesn't run. He doesn't resist. He simply raises his hands and says, "You got me." The arrest that Cleveland has been waiting for happens without drama, without violence. The man responsible for 11 murders surrenders as quietly as he lived among his victims' remains. At police headquarters, Detective Lieutenant Thomas Stacho, the same officer who first entered the house on Imperial Avenue, sits across from Anthony Sowell in interview room 3. What happens next will provide crucial insights into the mind of a serial killer. "Tell me about the women," Detective Stacho begins. Sowell's response chills everyone in the room. He speaks about his victims like objects, like possessions. No remorse, no emotion. Just cold, calculated descriptions of how he lured them, how he killed them, how he disposed of their bodies. "They came willingly," Sowell tells investigators. "Nobody forced them to come to my house." It's a statement that reveals the twisted logic of a predator who sees his victims as responsible for their own deaths. But the most shocking revelation comes when investigators ask about other victims, other women who might have entered 12205 Imperial Avenue and never left. Sowell pauses, considers, and then admits there might be more. "I can't remember all of them," he says with disturbing casualness. "Sometimes things got confused." The implication is horrifying. Are there other victims? Other families who deserve answers? As the interrogation continues, a profile emerges of a man completely disconnected from human empathy. Sowell describes his crimes like someone discussing the weather. No guilt, no acknowledgement that 11 families have been destroyed by his actions. Detective Stacho has interviewed hundreds of criminals, but Anthony Sowell is different. "It was like talking to an empty shell," he'll later tell reporters. There was no humanity left in him. But even as Sowell sits in custody, investigators realize their work is just beginning. They need to build an airtight case. They need to ensure this monster never sees freedom again. Coming up in Chapter 6, the truth about Anthony Sowell's methods is finally revealed. How did he kill 11 women without anyone knowing? The answer will disturb you. December 2009. As investigators piece together evidence from 12205 Imperial Avenue, a methodical killer emerges from the shadows. This wasn't random violence. This was calculated predation perfected over time. Dr. Elizabeth Peacock, a forensic psychologist brought in to profile Sowell, describes what she found. Anthony Sowell represents the most dangerous type of serial killer, one who appears completely normal while harboring an absolute absence of human empathy. The method was devastatingly simple. Sowell would cruise Cleveland's east side, targeting women struggling with addiction. He offered them drugs, alcohol, a warm place to get high. To women living on the margins, sleeping in shelters or abandoned buildings, Sowell's house seemed like salvation. He understood vulnerability, Dr. Peacock explains. He could identify women who wouldn't be immediately missed, whose disappearances wouldn't generate massive police attention. Once inside his house, Sowell would wait, let his victims get high, let their guard down. Then he would strike. The medical examiner's reports reveal the true horror. Most victims were manually strangled, killed by Sowell's bare hands. Others were gagged or had ligatures around their necks. The violence was personal, intimate, prolonged, but the most disturbing aspect was what came after. Sowell didn't just kill his victims, he lived with them. Bodies were hidden throughout the house while he continued his daily routine. He would sit on his front porch, chat with neighbors, all while decomposing corpses lay just feet away. The smell everyone blamed on Ray's sausage, that was the smell of death. Of 11 women slowly decomposing while their killer went about his business. The level of compartmentalization required for this behavior is extraordinary, Dr. Peacock notes. Sowell could literally live with the dead while maintaining the facade of normalcy. But here's what makes this case even more tragic. Several victims almost escaped. Tonia Carmichael, 52, was found with defensive wounds suggesting she fought for her life. Nancy Cobbs, 43, had injuries indicating she tried to run. These women didn't die easily. They fought, they struggled, they tried to survive. Yet no one heard their screams, no one came to help. The investigation reveals that Sowell's house became a tomb where he stored his trophies. Each body represented not just a life lost, but a family destroyed, children left wondering why their mother never came home. And through it all, Anthony Sowell maintained his mask of respectability. Neighbors describe him as helpful, quiet, normal, the perfect camouflage for a monster. Coming up in our final chapter, justice comes to Imperial Avenue, but the scars left by Anthony Sowell will never fully heal. July 22, 2011. The Cuyahoga County Courthouse becomes the stage for one of Cleveland's most important trials. Anthony Sowell faces 85 charges, including 11 counts of aggravated murder. For families who lost loved ones, this trial represents their only chance at justice. Yvette Culver, mother of victim Tishana, sits in the front row every day. "I need to look him in the eye," she tells reporters. "I need him to know that my daughter mattered." DNA links Sowell to multiple victims. The house on Imperial Avenue speaks for itself, a chamber of horrors that no defense attorney can explain away. But it's the testimony of survivor Latundra Billups that provides the most powerful moment of the trial. Taking the stand, Latundra describes her assault in vivid detail, how Sowell changed from friendly to violent, how she felt the electrical cord tightening around her neck, how she escaped death by mere seconds. "If I hadn't survived," she tells the jury, "he would still be killing." The defense attempts to portray Sowell as mentally ill, as someone whose traumatic childhood led to these crimes. But the evidence of premeditation is too strong. This wasn't mental illness. This was evil, pure and simple. On August 10, 2011, after deliberating for just 2 days, the jury returns its verdict, guilty on all counts. When asked if he wants to address the court, Anthony Sowell declines. Even facing the death penalty, he shows no remorse, no acknowledgement of the pain he's caused. Judge Dick Ambrose sentences him to death. But for the families of Sowell's victims, the legal victory brings little comfort. 11 women are still gone. Children still grow up without their mothers. The damage Anthony Sowell inflicted can never be undone. In 2018, the city of Cleveland agreed to pay $1 million to the families of 6 victims, acknowledgement that systemic failures allowed Sowell to continue killing. The house at 1220 M5 Imperial Avenue was demolished in 2011. In its place now stands a memorial garden dedicated to Sowell's victims. 11 stones, each bearing the name of a woman whose life was cut short. On February 8, 2021, Anthony Sowell died in prison of natural causes, his appeals exhausted, his death sentence never carried out. But the questions raised by this case remain. How many other women disappear from our communities without adequate investigation? How many predators hide behind facades of normalcy? How many families wait for answers that may never come? The Cleveland Strangler case ended with Sowell's death, but its lessons about protecting the vulnerable, about taking missing persons seriously, about recognizing evil in ordinary places, those lessons must not be forgotten, because somewhere tonight, another predator might be perfecting his methods, another vulnerable woman might be accepting an invitation that seems like salvation but leads to death. The cost of looking away is too high. The price of indifference is measured in lives lost. Remember their names: Crystal Dozier, Tishana Culver, Tonia Carmichael, Nancy Cobbs, and 7 other women whose stories ended in a house of horrors on Imperial Avenue. Their deaths revealed a monster. Let their memory inspire us to do better. If this case disturbed you as much as it did me, show your support by hitting that like button. It helps us continue investigating the cases that matter. And subscribe, because next week we're diving into another serial killer who hid in plain sight for over a decade. What other cases would you like us to cover? Drop your suggestions in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe out there.